Welcome to Into the Margins, where we explore the stories, strategies, and decisions behind profitable businesses to inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs. I'm Al Donovan, editor at Into the Margins.
And I'm Allison Bennett, business journalist at Into the Margins.
So imagine trying to build a suspension bridge,
Yeah.
right? But you're just staring at a river, guessing where the steel cable should go, and you just start pouring concrete.
That sounds like a complete disaster.
It is. But statistically speaking, I mean, that is essentially what most first-time founders are doing when they launch a company. They have this grand vision of the bridge, but they have absolutely zero architectural blueprints.
Yeah, and when the bridge inevitably collapses, it's not because the vision was necessarily bad. It's because they completely skipped the blueprint. It is a phenomenal way to frame it, honestly.
Right. People fall in love with the romance of entrepreneurship.
Oh, absolutely. The idea of being your own boss, or that daydream of a massive financial exit. And because of that, they treat the actual mechanics of building the business as an afterthought. They want the destination without bothering to map the terrain.
Which perfectly sets up our mission for you today. We are taking a deep dive into what is arguably the most misunderstood, groaned about document in the business world, which is the business plan.
The dreaded business plan.
Exactly. And the goal here is to completely shift your perspective. Like, if you are listening to this and thinking a business plan is just tedious homework you fill out to appease some bank manager, we really need to recalibrate.
Yeah, because a business plan is a vital, critical thinking tool. I mean, it is the ultimate mechanism to stress test your assumptions before you put your actual savings, your time, and honestly, your sanity on the line.
Right. And to back that up, I mean, you look at the Bureau of Labor statistics. Their data consistently shows that something like 20% of new businesses fail within their first year.
And it's like 50% by year 5.
Exactly. And a massive chunk of those failures comes down to a lack of planning and running out of cash. So we have to start with a massive reality check. Do not start a business just because you want to get rich.
That is such a critical point. If wealth is your singular driver, the sheer friction of building a company from scratch is going to break you.
It will. You need a genuine passion for solving a specific problem because, well, solving problems is what actually generates revenue. You need the grit to survive the days when the revenue just isn't there.
The mindset shift here is moving from, I have a fun idea, to I am responsible for a venture. Because a venture has moving parts, right? It has liabilities. It has competitors who actively want to crush you.
Yeah, they really do.
The business plan is the arena where you fight those battles on paper first. It's where your mistakes cost you, eraser shavings instead of thousands of dollars.
So let's unpack that paper arena, and we'll start with the first hurdle, which is the executive summary. This is where you have to define exactly what this business is. But here is this highly counterintuitive detail. It sits at the very front of the document, right? It's page 1. But you were supposed to write it absolutely last.
Oh, man, yeah. Which is the exact trap that paralyzes so many first-time founders. They sit down, they open a blank document, they type executive summary in bold at the top, and then they just stare right at it until they give up. The paralysis happens because you are trying to summarize decisions you haven't actually made yet. I mean, if you try to write the executive summary first, you inevitably end up writing a marketing pitch instead.
You write a manifesto.
Right, this vague philosophical manifesto about how your new app is going to change the world. But an executive summary isn't a manifesto, it's a synthesis. It is a dense, highly distilled snapshot of your financial projections, your operational reality, and your defined market gaps. You can only synthesize that after you have agonized over the details.
Which means you have to skip page 1 and dive straight into the core of the document, which is the product or service description. And this is where the daydream really has to end, and the ruthless specificity has to begin.
Yeah, you have to define the literal functionality of what you are selling, but functionality is just the baseline, right? The critical thinking exercise here is establishing the value proposition.
And that means making hard choices.
Very hard exclusionary choices. Are you competing on absolute premium quality? Are you competing on logistical speed? Or, are you competing on a massive feature set? Or just on price?
And the absolute cardinal sin of a new business is going out there and claiming, hey, we are the highest quality, we're the fastest, and we're the cheapest.
It completely defies the laws of physics and economics. You cannot be all things to all people. If you are the fastest and the highest quality, you cannot be the cheapest.
Right, the math doesn't work.
It doesn't. If you are the cheapest, you are sacrificing either speed or quality somewhere along the line. You have to choose your axis. And that choice, it's driven by the core why.
Which means defining the exact, specific problem your product solves for the buyer. It makes me think of Clayton Christensen's framework from Harvard Business School, the jobs to be done theory.
Oh, I love that framework.
It's so good. The idea that customers don't just buy a product, they literally hire it to do a job, like his famous milkshake study.
Right, where people were buying milkshakes at 8 in the morning.
Exactly. They weren't buying them because they wanted a dessert. They were hiring the milkshake to be a thick, long-lasting breakfast that wouldn't make a mess in the car during a long, boring commute.
That distinction is everything.
It really is. Like, if I buy a basic $3 cup of drip coffee at a drive-thru, I am hiring that coffee to wake me up as fast as possible so I can get to my morning meeting. I'm valuing speed.
But if you go to a boutique roaster
And pay $8 for a pour-over, I am hiring that coffee to provide a luxurious sensory experience. I'm valuing quality and atmosphere.
And if your business plan cannot clearly articulate the exact job your product is being hired to do and why your specific execution matters to that buyer, you don't actually have a business model.
You just have a hobby.
Exactly. But once you have defined that internal why, the plan forces you to look outward. You have to look at the external world to see if anyone actually cares about your solution.
And that pivot outward is the market analysis, which really comes down to this. Understanding the landscape is the difference between a guess and a strategy.
Without it, you aren't an entrepreneur, you're just a gambler hoping the roulette wheel lands on your number.
Right. You have to define your target audience and look at the macro state of the industry. Like, is it growing? Is it facing new regulations? But, okay, here's where I want to push back a bit, specifically regarding the whole competitor audit phase of market analysis.
The competitor audit is usually where founders discover their idea isn't as unique as they thought.
I get that. But doesn't obsessing over your rivals inherently stifle your own innovation? Like, standard advice always says to look at where your competitors fall short.
Right, to find the gaps.
But if you spend all your strategic energy looking left and right at what the incumbents are doing, don't you just end up creating a slightly better version of the status quo?
I wouldn't say
No,
that.
hear me out. Why not just start with a completely blank canvas and forge a new path? Look at the blue ocean strategy concept by Chan Kim and Renee Mauborgne.
Ah, the blue ocean stuff?
Yeah. They argue that instead of battling competitors in a blood-red ocean of existing demand, you should create an entirely new market space, a blue ocean, where the competition is totally irrelevant, like what Nintendo did with the Wii or Cirque du Soleil.
I mean, that is a brilliant, highly romantic strategy if you have unlimited venture capital and a decade to educate the consumer on a brand new behavioral paradigm.
But wait, if you ignore them, you might build something entirely revolutionary.
Or you might just build something nobody wants. Look, a blank canvas in the business world is astronomically expensive and usually fatal. You aren't obsessing over competitors to copy them.
But you are letting them define the boundaries of your imagination. You're looking at their flaws instead of inventing a completely new paradigm.
You want to look at their flaws. That is the entire point. If you ignore the competition, you are operating with a massive voluntary blind spot.
I just think you're playing their game instead of inventing your own.
For the vast majority of startups, ignoring competitors just means you are going to repeat their very expensive mistakes. Look at Cirque du Soleil. They didn't invent the circus. They just audited the existing circus model, saw that animals were expensive and ethically problematic, and removed them.
Okay, that's a fair point.
The point of the competitor audit is finding specific, unserved needs that the massive incumbents are too slow, too arrogant, or too bloated to see.
But you are still defining your business relative to theirs.
Because you are using their existing market footprint to validate that a demand actually exists. They spent millions of dollars proving people want to buy this type of product.
So you let them do the heavy lifting.
Exactly. You don't have to spend that money. You use their data. You look at their armor to find the chinks. By identifying the exact opportunities your rivals are missing, you aren't copying them. You are mapping the minefield so you can walk through it safely.
Okay, I see what you're saying. The tension isn't actually between copying and innovating. The tension is between blind innovation and informed disruption.
Precisely.
I see the mechanism now. You are essentially using the competitor's size against them. You let them prove the market exists, but you use their specific operational blind spots to carve out your own highly targeted territory.
You locate the gap. But, and this is crucial, Finding a gap in the market is utterly useless if you don't have a systematic way to bridge it. The vision has to translate into reality.
Which perfectly transitions us from the theoretical to the engine room of the business, the marketing and sales strategy and the operations plan. How do you get people's attention, and how do you physically deliver the solution every single day?
Let's talk about marketing and sales first, because there's a really common misconception here regarding pricing.
Yeah, let's look at that. A lot of traditional guides group pricing under marketing and sales. And on the surface, that feels like a miscategorization.
How so?
Well, isn't pricing just a mathematical formula? You take your cost of goods, you add your desired profit margin, and whatever that number is, well, that's your price. Why is it treated as a marketing channel?
Because treating pricing as purely a math equation is how you completely alienate your target audience. Pricing is fundamentally a psychological marketing tool.
A psychological tool.
Yes, it is the single loudest signal you send to the market about your value proposition.
A signal. So it's not just about covering your costs, it's about what the number communicates to the buyer's brain before they even read your product description.
Exactly. Think about the SaaS industry, software as a service. Let's say a new startup builds a highly complex cybersecurity tool and they price it at, $9 a month. What does that signal to a chief information officer at a major corporation?
It signals that it's flimsy.
Yeah.
It signals risk.
Right.
If it's that cheap, the CIO is going to think it can't possibly protect a multi-million-dollar database.
Yeah.
Even if the code is absolute genius, the low price creates a massive lack of trust.
Precisely. It's a concept of Veblen goods, or just premium pricing psychology. In that scenario, pricing it at $2,000 a month might actually increase sales.
Because the premium price signals reliability and serious infrastructure.
Yes. Conversely, if your value proposition is democratizing access to a basic design tool, a high price signals arrogance and disconnect. Your pricing must explicitly appeal to the psychological expectations of your target market. It is a communication tool, not just an accounting output.
That makes total sense. And once you have calibrated that pricing signal and you are pushing your message out through your marketing channels, you have to map the actual sales process.
Yes. The granularity required here is intense.
It really is. You have to trace the exact journey from the moment a customer discovers you, maybe on a podcast or ad, to the exact moment their credit card is processed.
You cannot leave the customer's journey to chance. If they click a link on social media, where exactly do they land? Is it just a generic homepage, or is it a targeted landing page?
And if they submit an email inquiry, does an automated response go out immediately, or does a human have to manually reply?
Right, and how many days until the follow-up? Every single friction point in that journey is a place where you lose revenue.
And removing that friction requires incredibly tight internal systems. Which brings us to the operations plan. This is the unglamorous, rolled-up sleeves reality of the deep dive. It is the connective tissue of the entire business plan.
It is the daily grind. The operations plan forces you to articulate the logistics of delivering your promise consistently, day in and day out.
I picture the operations plan like the kitchen line during a Saturday night dinner rush at a massive restaurant.
That's a great analogy.
Right. The marketing team got the diners in the door. The pricing strategy set their expectations. The sales process got them to sit down and order the steak. But none of that matters. Literally none of it if the kitchen line isn't organized.
Exactly. Who ordered the meat from the supplier?
Right. And what happens if the supplier's truck breaks down? Do you have a backup vendor? Who is prepping the vegetables? Is the stove actually calibrated?
And in a modern business context, the kitchen line is often digital. It is your organizational software infrastructure.
Yes, the tech stack.
Are you using a CRM, like a customer relationship management system, so you don't lose track of those leads? What project management software is keeping your remote team communicating?
If the engine room breaks down, your brilliant market gap and your psychological pricing strategy are completely worthless. You can't deliver the steak.
But here's the thing. You can build the most efficient kitchen line in the world, but if the ingredients cost more than the meal, the restaurant dies.
Yes. The engine runs on capital, which leads us to the final and often the most intimidating piece of the roadmap, the reality check. This is the financial projections and then validating the entire plan in the real world.
The financials are where the dream faces the harsh light of mathematics. You are always advised to be both realistic and optimistic when doing projections.
Which sounds incredibly poetic, but balancing those two forces is a nearly impossible psychological tightrope. How do you actually strike that balance without just, making up numbers to make yourself feel better?
You break it down into a triad. The first pillar is your startup costs. This is where you must be coldly, brutally realistic. You are itemizing every single expense.
Equipment, software licenses, legal fees.
Permits, insurance, initial inventory, all of it. And the golden rule here is to never, ever assume best-case scenario pricing. Pad these numbers because hidden costs always emerge.
Always.
Yeah.
So the realism is entirely focused on the outlays, the money going out. Where does the optimism live?
In the revenue forecast.
Mhm.
But it has to be grounded optimism. You don't just pick a massive number out of the sky and say, we'll make $1 million.
Right.
You mathematically tether it to the market analysis you did earlier and the pricing strategy you built. You form a hypothesis. If we capture just 0.5% of our defined target market and they convert at our specific price point, here is our projected revenue for year one.
And then the third pillar of the triad is where that brutal realism of your costs and the grounded optimism of your revenue finally collide. The break-even point.
The single most important metric in early-stage business.
It really is. The break-even point is the exact month and year when your cumulative revenue finally covers your cumulative expenses. Because until you hit that point, you are just bleeding money.
Knowing exactly when that point is projected to happen dictates how much startup capital you actually need to survive until the bleeding stops.
Let's look at the inherent flaw in all of this.
Uh-oh.
No, seriously. Even with the most meticulous competitor audit, the sharpest pricing psychology, and the most conservative cost estimates, financial projections are still just educated guesses.
Well, yeah.
You are projecting human behavior into the future. You are assuming customers will behave exactly the way your Excel spreadsheet says they will.
Which is, without a doubt, the greatest vulnerability of any business plan. You can build a perfectly logical model that completely fails upon first contact with actual human beings.
And this is where we have to talk about the absolute lifelines for any entrepreneur. The minimum viable product, or MVP, and customer feedback.
This is straight out of Eric Rye's lean startup methodology.
Exactly, because you cannot spend a year locked in a room writing a 50-page business plan, investing $100,000, and launching a finalized product without ever actually talking to a real customer.
Building an MVP is about testing your core hypothesis as cheaply and quickly as possible. You strip away all the bells and whistles. You build the absolute most basic version of your product that still delivers your core why.
And you launch it immediately.
Yes.
Which is terrifying, right?
Yeah.
Because you are putting something unpolished into the world.
Yeah.
You are actively inviting criticism.
But that criticism is the only thing that grounds your financial guesses in reality. I mean, you don't know if your pricing signal actually works until a real person hesitates before pulling out their credit card.
Right. You don't know if your operational kitchen line works until a real customer complains that their order was late.
Obsessing over customer feedback from an MVP translates qualitative human behavior into quantifiable data. It forces you to update those initial assumptions.
And updating those assumptions doesn't have to mean manually recalculating massive spreadsheets every time a customer pivots. There's dedicated business planning software out there now. Tools like LivePlan that are designed specifically to simplify this constant updating.
Yeah, they have built-in engines for financial forecasting. If you realize your MVP requires a higher customer acquisition cost than you thought, you just plug that new variable into the software.
And it automatically recalculates your break-even point. It allows the founder to focus entirely on the strategy rather than pulling their hair out fighting with spreadsheet formulas.
It removes the friction of maintenance. And maintaining the plan is vital. A business plan is not a static artifact. It is not something you print, bind, and shove in a drawer the day you launch. It is a living, breathing mechanism.
And that reality is the perfect way to synthesize everything we have unpacked today. For you listening, the goal was to shift how you view this document.
Yeah, it forces you out of the daydream.
It forces you to make exclusionary choices about your value proposition. It forces you to map the minefields laid by your competitors. It makes you confront the psychological signals of your pricing, build a resilient operational kitchen line, and ultimately face the cold, hard mathematics of your break-even point.
But the entire process circles back to a central tension. The tension between the blueprint and the reality of the construction site. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative question for you to ponder.
Let's hear it.
We have established that the business plan is a vital, critical thinking tool. You build the model, you launch the minimum viable product, and you gather the feedback. But what happens when the real world aggressively rejects your hypothesis?
Oof.
If the ultimate goal of the plan is to learn and adapt, at what point do you look at the brutal feedback from your MVP and decide to completely tear up your original executive summary and start over? When does a strategic pivot become a necessity? And when does stubbornly sticking to the plan become a fatal error?
That is the defining question of entrepreneurship, isn't it? Knowing when to trust the map and knowing when the terrain requires you to draw a completely new one.
Exactly.
We're going to leave you to weigh that balance on your own. If you want to read more, check out our blog at intothemargins.com/playbook.
There is so much good stuff in there.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We know your time is an investment, and we appreciate you dedicating it to going deep into the mechanics of building something real.
Absolutely.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below with your thoughts on when a founder should pivot versus when they should persevere. Until next time, keep pressure testing those assumptions, and we will be waiting for you in the next deep dive.